Oh boy, the gloves are coming off. President Trump lashing out in his ongoing feud with Nancy Pelosi. The president delivering a blistering response after the House Speaker reportedly told leading Democrats she doesn't want Trump impeached. She wants to see him in prison.
Nancy Pelosi's a disaster, okay? She's a disaster. And let her do what she wants. You know what? I think they're in big trouble because when you look at the kind of crimes that were committed, and I don't need any more evidence, and I guess from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of evidence coming in. I've tried to be nice to her because I would have liked to have gotten some deals done. She's incapable of doing deals. She's a nasty, vindictive, horrible person. The Mueller report came out. It was a disaster for them. She made a statement. It was a horrible, nasty, vicious statement while I'm overseas. Now, if I made any statement about anybody, it would be like a big head. Why would he do that when he's overseas? She is a terrible person. And I'll tell you, her name, it's Nervous Nancy, because she's a nervous wreck.
Wow. So, Jesse, today, then the president followed up with a tweet, I think we have it here, in which he talks about not impeachment, but, again, going to jail. So I'm thinking to myself, he says there's no evidence to justify having Nancy Pelosi make such a statement, but I'm thinking, is going to jail on his mind? Is he scared?
Yeah, Juan. Trump looks nervous, doesn't he?
Well, he looks nervous. Yeah, I mean,
you really think he thinks she's going to go to jail?
I hope not.
Yeah, he's not going to jail, Juan. And Nervous Nancy is like top 5 nickname, and that's going to stick. I just want to address the elephant in the room.
Please.
Greg is in a panic. He has a driving test on Monday, and he just found out it's not in the country, it's in a city. And this man is sweating bullets. He's going to record it in case someone tries to sabotage him for political purposes. The man is paranoid. I don't think he's going to make it through the show.
I'm only saying I'm anxious because somebody in my ear, producer, said that the prompter operator was flunked twice at this location. I don't need to know that stuff.
She told you that at 4:59.
Yes, at 4:59 before the show started.
New nickname, Nervous Greg.
Nervous Greg.
No, don't pick on it. Did you pass your driving test?
I did. You know why? Because my mother made me drive a stick shift and learn in a trucker's parking lot. Yes. And that was so embarrassing that I learned right away.
You wouldn't believe what I've learned in a trucker's parking lot.
All right, hey, well, this is a serious show.
You taught some people some things, too.
Okay, so you don't think he's worried about going to jail? That's just nonsense to him.
You know, Juan, he's not going to jail.
Okay, so Dana, by the way, I'm looking at the president there with talking to Laura Ingraham, and I'm thinking, you know, Dana worked for the White House. Dana understands the power of the office and symbolism. There he is in this Normandy graveyard, and he's going on attacking people. I just don't...
Well, he was asked questions, and when the president's asked questions, he answers them, and you're free to ask any question as well. You could have said, come back next week when I'm back at the White House. We can talk about all of this if you wanted to. But Nancy Pelosi, she's there at the cemetery as well. Somebody shouts a question to her. I'm not going to do that overseas. However, I don't think that she was too upset that the article was printed back home in Politico saying that she, at the Democratic meeting, said she'd rather see him in prison because it made her look tough. And she likes to dribble these things out there because she thinks it rattles him. Now, he wants to counterpunch, and look, location being what it is, it could be on Twitter. This is a feud that is going to go on forever. I feel like just every hour you could get something else. In fact, just last hour, we found out that Bruce Orr, who worked at the Justice Department, who was demoted, before he left the Justice Department, he was given $48,000 in bonus money.
Yeah, for
That's interesting. Okay, so like there's like little drips and drabs that come out.
Deep state Dana.
I am not deep state.
Bringing the heat.
I'm just saying that there's something every day that you can pick apart on this thing. The other thing is the U.S. Attorney John Durham that's working on the investigation of the investigators. Apparently, it was said to our own Catherine Herridge that he's asking all of the right questions. I don't know what that means, but it's enough to get this story going for another 3 days until you have John Dean testifying in front of the House on Monday.
So it never stops. So, Greg, let's come back to impeachment. Let's forget the jail stuff for a second.
Yeah.
The president says there's no evidence. You know, he doesn't understand it, and yet the New York Times today is printing an article in which it says, well, here's what articles of impeachment might look like, and here they're talking about lying, obstruction, financial impropriety. What do you make of this?
Well, okay, the Times op-ed shows you how the media has become essentially a bathhouse of mutual massage. They're in this bubble. The New York Times is writing for the activists on Twitter. Yeah. The Twitter activists are tweeting to get the attention of the New York Times. Meanwhile, the rest of the world goes on. When you look at again, historical unemployment. You see progress on various fronts. I mean, obviously, we can talk about terror. You can talk about trade. You can talk about jobs. You can talk about the economy. All of these deeds as opposed to words. But the Times can't look at that because that destroys their entire narrative. Could I talk about Nervous Nancy?
Please.
Since, by the way, it is a great nickname because you can use it on anybody. Like Nervous Nancy now replaces Nervous Nelly. Yeah. So you're too young to know Nervous Nelly, but you
or Negative Nancy.
I am a nervous. I'm a Nervous Nancy. I am. I feel like a Nervous Nancy. And to your point, which I understand about I think that there was a juxtaposition there with the rows and rows of the dead, and this is a week when we're honoring those people. But for when you're being interviewed, you aren't thinking about what's behind you most of the time when you're being interviewed, and I think that the juxtaposition is interesting because back at that time they were dodging grenades being hurled at them, and here it's just insults. And so maybe the juxtaposition ironically talks about how we're in a lucky better time because of those rows and rows of dead behind him. So I don't know, it's kind of an interesting thing, and it's an odd place to have an interview.
But you're sensitive to the point. I thought it was me being sensitive to it because Robert Mueller, actually, a former Marine, Vietnam veteran, and I just thought, is this the place to do it?
I don't think there should be any interviews there.
Okay, that's
how I feel.
All right, Katie, as the president comes home, he's going to face a lot of issues. We see some kind of uncertain economic numbers. The Fed is talking about maybe the need to pump up or lower, actually, interest rates. What do you think? And, of course, he's got the battle with Republicans in the Senate over the use of tariffs on the immigration issue.
Well, I think the economy is doing just fine based on the track record the Trump administration has had up until this point. But in terms of working with Nancy Pelosi on big things like infrastructure or immigration, I think Democrats are missing a big opportunity here because when President Trump went into the Oval Office, he wasn't a hard partisan. In fact, you could argue he was an independent run on a Republican ticket. And he had donated to Democrats and Republicans for all kinds of causes. He had been open about the fact that he wanted to do infrastructure during the campaign. There are things that Democrats actually could work with President Trump on to regain a lot of those blue-collar workers that people like Joe Biden are trying to regain. And yet, because of this constant feud, that's not happening. And I think Democrats are really, missing their chance to get a lot of this done, or at least talk about it and why it's important. But one more thing on Nancy Pelosi. Look, she made this comment. The president's asked about it. Is he not allowed to respond just because he's overseas when the comment was made? Well, he was overseas. I still don't understand this dynamic of he's accused of something, and then when he responds, he's the one who's in the wrong. Like, you're not allowed to respond to allegations or accusations anymore?
Yeah, you could argue that the president has been classier when it comes to his treatment of Nancy Pelosi. He came in and, assuming office, he had very nice things to say about Nancy and Chuck, and told me when I interviewed him he's looking forward to negotiating with them, and they think they're great people. And he's tried to do that several times, and he's met with them, and he's tried to bring them on board on bipartisan issues like renegotiating NAFTA or fixing the immigration crisis. But time and time again, he's been sabotaged by Nancy, and then she says dirty, nasty things just to assuage her caucus because she's lost control. And I think it looks like he's had it.
Well, if you look
at the way that
if you look at the way that Chuck Schumer reacts and the way that Nancy Pelosi reacts, they do these pressers together after these meetings. But Chuck Schumer is actually much more reserved when it comes to what he's saying about the president. He's actually praising the president on China, for example, whereas Nancy Pelosi is, catering to the far left of her party and doesn't come to the middle at all. When Chuck Schumer's reaction has been a little more muted, even if not a whole.
I just think, just to sum it up for me, better to have insult wars than real wars.
That's true.
Amen.
Well, amen.